My name is Penelope Harris, and 4 years ago, my life changed with 3 knocks on my bakery's back door. When I opened it, my younger sister Camilla was standing there, eyeliner smudged, hair a tangled mess, holding a squirming 3-month-old baby boy. "This is Ethan," she said flatly. "I need you to watch him." For a while. Before I could ask how long, she shoved a diaper bag into my hands, kissed the baby's head once, and walked away without looking back. I called our parents that night, desperate for help. They didn't even hesitate. "He's your burden now," my father sneered, as if I'd brought this on myself. I thought it would be temporary. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and just when I began to believe Ethan was truly mine, Camilla came back not for love, but for something far uglier. The first night, Ethan cried like the world was ending. I tried every trick Google could offer at 2 a.m., swaddling too tight, too loose, humming, bouncing, pacing circles around my tiny living room until my calves burned. When he finally collapsed into a thin, hiccuping sleep on my chest, I sat there afraid to move, staring at the ceiling fan like it might whisper instructions I'd missed. At dawn, I carried him to the bakery. I propped his car seat behind the counter where the warm air from the ovens wouldn't hit him, and I started the day. Butter softening, eggs cracking, sugar hissing as it met the mixing bowl. My hands knew the choreography. My heart didn't. Every timer felt too loud, every tray felt too heavy, and I kept checking to make sure Ethan's chest rose and fell. When the first customers wandered in, nurses after night shift, contractors with flour-dusted caps, Mrs. Duffy, who always asked for the corner cinnamon roll, they paused, softened, and then the questions began. "Is he yours, Pen?" "He's my nephew." The words scraped on the way out. Just for a while. They nodded with that particular Southern mercy that holds its judgment until it knows your whole story, then quietly brings you casseroles anyway. By lunch, someone had left a hand-me-down stroller by the back door and a note. "For Ethan. You've got this." I cried into a cooling rack. The days arranged themselves around him. I shifted my prep to nights, learned the language of ounces and ounces of formula, traded playlists of indie folk for the white noise of rain. I discovered that a baby can sense when you're about to sit down and will immediately protest your comfort. I learned to pipe cream while balancing a pacifier with my pinky, and to take inventory with one ear tuned to the small breaths behind me. My parents didn't visit. Mom texted, "How's Camilla?" skipping Ethan's name altogether. Dad called once to warn me that attachment complicates things. I saved the voicemail and never played it again. But Ethan attached to everything: light, faces, the jingle of the bakery door. At 6 weeks, he started smiling in a way that felt like forgiveness for all my mistakes. Mrs. Duffy crocheted a pale blue blanket that turned his car seat into a cloud. A firefighter regular showed me how to install the base correctly in my sedan. A high schooler who washed dishes after class began coming early to rock him while muffins rose. The bakery became a village, and I became its mayor with frosting on my sleeves and a baby on my hip. I kept a notebook under the register. Not the pretty leather one for recipes, the ugly spiral with coffee stains. In it, I wrote timestamps like prayers. 2:14 a.m. First full bottle. 7:2 p.m. bath without screaming. Tuesday giggled at the sound of the mixer. On the back page, I listed questions for Camilla that I would ask when she came to take him back. Does he like being swaddled? Is there a pediatrician? Do you want me to pack extra formula? The list grew. Her silence did too. 3 months became 4. Ethan learned my laugh and I learned his. He fell asleep fastest to the rhythm of sheet pans sliding and the thump of the proofing drawer. On Sundays, when the city was quiet and the river smelled like metal and rain, we walked the squares and I whispered the names of trees: live, oak, magnolia, crepe myrtle, as if I could root him with vocabulary alone. People say babies don't remember. Maybe that's true. But I do. I remember the exact moment my fear softened into certainty. A Tuesday, early evening, sunlight slanting across racks of cooling brioche. Ethan woke, blinked up at me, and lifted both arms, the universal request. I picked him up and felt something steady click into place, like a lock turning, like a timer dinging when the center is finally set. He wasn't my burden. He was my boy. and I stopped counting the days. By the time Ethan turned 1, he could toddle between the bakery counter and the kitchen door, chubby hands reaching for anything shiny or dangerous. I'd learned to work with one eye on the ovens and the other on him like a magician with an audience of one. My regulars had stopped asking if he was just visiting. He was mine in all the ways that mattered, except the legal ones. My parents still hadn't come by to see him. They lived only 20 minutes away, but I may as well have been on another continent. When Mom finally did call, it wasn't to ask about Ethan's first steps or his first word, cookie. For the record, it counts. She wanted to know if I'd heard from Camilla. No, I said, wiping powdered sugar from my hands. She hasn't called since she left him here. Well, she's young. Mom sighed, the way you sigh over a lost umbrella. She needs time to figure herself out. It was like talking to someone who refused to admit there was a fire until the house collapsed. Dad was worse, short, sharp, dismissive. You chose to keep him, he said once. Don't act like you're the victim. I stopped bringing them up. It wasn't worth the ache, but every so often, when Ethan napped on my chest, I'd imagine what it would be like if my parents came through the bakery door and actually really saw him. I told myself it didn't matter. Still, the wish hung there, stubborn as a cobweb in a corner you can't quite reach. Savannah's seasons blurred sticky summers, gold leaf autumns, winters that smelled like cinnamon and salt air. I took Ethan to Forsyth Park every Sunday after the bakery closed early, pushing him in the stroller under moss-draped oaks. We fed ducks, chased pigeons, and sometimes sat on the fountain's edge with bakery leftovers for any passerby who looked hungry. It was in those quiet hours I realized I was thinking less about when Camilla might come back and more about what I'd do if she did. I'd heard enough from customers, little murmurs about her in bars, at riverfront clubs to know she hadn't exactly turned over a new leaf. But without proof, all I had was suspicion. And suspicion doesn't win you anything in family court. Ethan grew, and so did the invisible thread between us. He started calling me Mama Pen, a mashup born from the confusion of toddlers and the truth they instinctively know. He didn't know the word aunt. He knew who got up when he cried at night, who packed his snacks, who taught him the difference between cinnamon and nutmeg. Camilla was a ghost. My parents were statues, and I was both parent and provider, building a life for a boy who didn't share my blood but shared my heartbeat. I thought the hard part was over. I thought we were safe in our little bakery warm world. But looking back, I can see the hairline cracks already forming, the kind that start deep, silent, and invisible, until the day they split wide open. Ethan's 4th birthday fell on a Saturday, which was both a blessing and a logistical nightmare. The bakery was slammed from the moment the doorbell jingled at 6:30 a.m., but the smell of cooling sugar cookies and buttercream made the place feel like one giant gift wrap for the day ahead. I closed early, hanging a hand-lettered sign that read, "Private event birthday boy" inside. Mrs. Duffy brought balloons shaped like dinosaurs, and the firefighter regulars arrived with a toy fire truck that made real siren sounds. Ethan wore a paper crown that slipped over one eyebrow, giving him the look of a tiny, benevolent king. We sang, we laughed, we smeared frosting across cheeks and noses, and in that moment, watching him grin with a mouthful of blue cake, I thought, we've made it. We've beaten the odds. The truth was, those 4 years had been a patchwork quilt of tiny victories stitched together with exhaustion. There were mornings I opened the bakery on 3 hours sleep because Ethan's cough had kept me pacing the floor all night. Afternoons when I ran from the front counter to the daycare and back, juggling trays of cupcakes like relay batons. But there was also the magic. His first wobbly bike ride along the river, the way he'd belt out "You Are My Sunshine" to customers as if they'd paid for a concert. His fascination with measuring cups, half a cup means this much, right, Mama Pen? My parents rarely called, and when they did, their voices carried the same cool distance. They asked about Camilla, not Ethan. When I mentioned his milestones, there was an awkward pause, as if I'd brought up a stranger's child. Eventually, I stopped volunteering details. Camilla, for her part, remained a rumor. Customers would mention spotting her at late-night bars or weekend festivals in Tybee, but she never reached out. Not for birthdays, not for Christmas, not even when Ethan landed in urgent care with a high fever and I spent 2 days sleeping in a chair beside his hospital bed. Instead, my little family grew without her. The bakery became not just a business, but a home with revolving doors of surrogate aunts and uncles regulars who taught Ethan card tricks, brought him comic books, or let him help sweep the front porch. One summer evening, after closing, we sat on the bakery's back step eating leftover peach pie. Fireflies blinked in the alley, and Ethan leaned against me, sticky-fingered and content. "Are we a family?" he asked, like it was a quiz he needed to pass. "Yes," I said, without a heartbeat's hesitation. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to picking the sugary crumble off his slice. I didn't know then that our little world, flower-dusted, love-heavy, safe, was already on borrowed time. I couldn't hear the footsteps yet, but Camilla was coming, and she wasn't coming for hugs. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September, the kind where Savannah's air hangs thick with the ghost of summer. I was wiping down the bakery counter when the bell over the door gave its cheerful jingle. I looked up expecting Mrs. Duffy or a tourist hunting pie. Instead, Camilla stood there. Her hair was sleek, nails manicured a sharp red, wearing a tailored dress that whispered money, or at least the illusion of it. For a moment, my brain couldn't reconcile the woman in front of me with the girl who'd once dropped a newborn into my arms and vanished. "Penny," she said, smiling like we'd just run into each other at a coffee shop. "You look older." I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. "It's Penelope now? What do you want, Camilla?" Her gaze swept the bakery, lingering on the framed photo of Ethan in his Halloween firefighter costume. "I came to see my son." My heartbeat spiked. "After 4 years?" She shrugged, as if time was a minor inconvenience. "I've been working on myself. I'm ready to be his mother again." Every instinct screamed no. But before I could speak, she added, "And I know about the trust." The word hit like a brick. Our grandparents left him one, didn't they? $1.5 million, available when he's 10. I talked to Mom and Dad, they confirmed it. And as his mother, I can manage it for him. There it was. Not love, not guilt, money. I stepped out from behind the counter, putting myself between her and the photo wall. "You left him with me because you didn't want to be tied down. You don't get to just walk back in when there's a payday." Her smile cooled. "We'll see about that." She glanced toward the door. "Tell Ethan his mother stopped by." After she left, I stood in the quiet bakery, the hum of the refrigerators suddenly too loud. I called my parents, hoping for sense, maybe even support. Mom's voice was syrupy. "Camilla's trying, Penelope. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Dad was blunt. "She's his mother. You can't keep him forever." It hit me then, the sides had already been chosen, and I wasn't on theirs. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I told him someone had come by to see me. I didn't use her name. He tilted his head, thoughtful, and went back to building a Lego tower. But when I finally said, "Do you remember your mom?" his face darkened. "Don't like her," he murmured, so soft I almost missed it. "She's scary." I held him until his breathing slowed. My mind was already spinning, racing ahead to the fight I knew was coming. Camilla wanted Ethan back for the money, for control, for reasons that had nothing to do with love, and I wasn't going to let her have him. Not now, not ever. 2 weeks after Camilla's visit, the knock came just after breakfast. Ethan was still in his dinosaur pajamas, chasing a Matchbox car across the kitchen floor. I opened the door to find a man in a gray suit holding a clipboard. "Penelope Harris?" "Yes?" He handed me an envelope thick enough to be heavy. "You've been served. Everything you've existed. You've been served." Inside was a summons. Camilla was suing me for full custody of Ethan. The allegations were dressed in legal language, but the knife was sharp enough to feel: alienation of affection, emotional manipulation, intentional separation of mother and child. She claimed I'd poisoned him against her, that I was standing in the way of their natural bond. My stomach twisted as I scanned the final page. The hearing was in 3 months. My name in black ink, her name right below it, 2 sisters reduced to opposing parties in bold type. When I called my parents, Mom's voice was brisk, almost rehearsed. "Camilla's doing what's best for her son. You need to think about letting go gracefully." "Gracefully?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. She abandoned him. Dad cut in from the background. You've always resented her, Penelope. Maybe this is about you, not him. I hung up before my anger could boil over into words I couldn't take back. By the next morning, I was in the office of Rachel Monroe, a local attorney with steel gray eyes and a desk stacked with neat piles of folders. She read the papers without interrupting, then leaned back. This isn't about maternal instinct, she said. It's about money, control, and optics. She'll try to look like the Reformed Mother Church on Sundays, steady job, clean apartment photos. We have to counter with reality. Reality, I repeated, thinking of Ethan's baby blanket, still folded in the bakery's back room. How do we prove that to a judge? Rachel tapped her pen. We find out where she's been these 4 years, who she's been with, how she's been living. If she's unfit, we make it undeniable. She gave me the card of Calvin Brooks, a private investigator who, according to Rachel, can find out if your neighbor's cat has a secret bank account. That night, I sat on Ethan's bed while he flipped through a picture book. Buddy, I said carefully, there's going to be some grown-up stuff happening soon. Some people might ask you questions. Just tell the truth, okay? He nodded solemnly, then whispered, Will you still be my mama Pen? My throat tightened. Always. When he fell asleep, I went to the kitchen, pulled out my spiral notebook, and turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, Reasons she can't have him. By the time I capped the pen, the list ran halfway down the page. And I wasn't finished. The fight wasn't just coming anymore. It was here, knocking at my door in a gray suit, and I was already sharpening my answers. Calvin Brooks didn't look like the TV version of a private investigator. No trench coat, no fedora, just a weathered ball cap, a windbreaker, and a notebook that looked like it had seen more rain than paper deserved. We met in the bakery after closing. He ordered a slice of pecan pie, ate it in 3 bites, and said, All right, Ms. Harris. Tell me where to start. I told him everything. The night Camilla left Ethan with me, her 4-year absence, her sudden return, and the trust fund she'd discovered. I handed him the only photos I had of her from recent years, grainy, secondhand shots sent by friends who'd spotted her around Tybee. She's clever, I said. She'll make herself look good if she knows someone's watching. Calvin scribbled something in his notebook. Then we watch when she doesn't know. Over the next 6 weeks, his updates came in fragments, cryptic texts, quick phone calls. The occasional manila envelope slid across my counter with a coffee order. The picture that emerged wasn't just unflattering, it was a demolition site. Camilla's steady job was bartending at a nightclub known more for after-hours gambling than cocktails. She'd been evicted twice in 3 years. Her most recent boyfriend had a rap sheet for assault, and they'd been seen arguing violently in public. But the most damning discovery came in the form of a voice recording Calvin managed to obtain. It was Camilla and my parents, sitting at what sounded like my parents' kitchen table, discussing how to get Ethan back so they could manage the trust properly. She doesn't deserve it, Camilla's voice hissed through the static. She's not even his real mom. My father replied, Once you have custody, we'll move the funds. No one can question it. When I played the clip for Rachel, she leaned back in her chair, eyes sharp. If this is authenticated, it's our nuclear option. But we hold it until the hearing. You want the element of shock. Meanwhile, life at the bakery had to keep moving. Ethan sensed something, though. He'd cling to me in the mornings, ask why I looked mad at the ceiling when I thought I was hiding my stress. I kept my answers gentle, but every night after he was asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table and reread the court documents, like they might rearrange themselves into something less cruel. 3 days before the hearing, Calvin handed me one last file. Thought you might want this in your back pocket. Inside were photos Camilla leaving a hotel with a man whose arm was around her waist, later that same day handing him a bundle of cash. The timestamp was from a week after she'd told me she was rebuilding her life for Ethan. That night, I packed a small tote bag for court. Not just the paperwork Rachel needed, but my own quiet arsenal. Ethan's hospital wristband from the fever scare, a copy of the adoption inquiry I'd never filed, a photo of him asleep in my arms at the bakery on his 2nd birthday. None of it was legally necessary. All of it was for me. A reminder of the years between that knock on my door and now. The morning of the hearing, Ethan sat at the kitchen table eating pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. "Big day?" he asked, echoing something I must have said 1,000 times to customers picking up wedding cakes. "The biggest," I said, kissing the top of his head. "And no matter what happens, you're my boy." His grin was sticky with syrup, his trust pure and unguarded. And in that moment, my nerves burned away, leaving only a clean, steady flame. Camilla wanted a fight. She was going to get one. And I was coming armed with the truth, sealed tight in a folder that would stop her cold. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, like every decision ever made there had been soaked in both. I sat at the long oak table next to Rachel, my lawyer, while Camilla sat at the opposite table with her attorney, a sharp-jawed man in an expensive suit who kept whispering in her ear like a snake feeding poison. Camilla looked different today. Hair pulled into a neat bun, pearl earrings, a soft pink blouse that screamed harmless mother. She even had a framed photo of herself holding Ethan as a baby. I almost laughed. She'd probably had to dig deep into her storage unit for that one. When the judge entered, the air shifted. He was a tall man with reading glasses perched low on his nose, the kind who didn't waste words. "Let's begin," he said, and the attorneys launched into their opening statements. Camilla's lawyer painted a picture of a young mother struggling with circumstances beyond her control, who had heroically turned her life around and now wanted to restore the natural maternal bond. He leaned on phrases like family reunification and the sanctity of blood ties. Rachel stood, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Your Honor, this is not a case of reunification. This is a case of abandonment, sustained neglect, and a late-stage financial motive. The child in question has known stability, care, and unconditional love only from my client, Penelope Harris." I kept my eyes on the judge as the testimonies began. Camilla spoke first, all teary eyes and trembling hands. She said she'd left Ethan with me because she wanted him safe while she sought help, that she'd always planned to come back, and that I'd poisoned him against her. When it was my turn, Rachel guided me gently through my side of the story the night Camilla left. The 4 years of milestones, the hospital visit, the trust fund revelation. My voice caught when I spoke about Ethan calling me Mama Pen, but I didn't cry. I wanted the judge to see strength, not pity. Then Rachel called Calvin Brooks. He laid out his findings with the precision of a man filing nails into a lock: Camilla's unstable housing, her boyfriend's criminal record, her ongoing nightlife job. When he mentioned the voice recording, Camilla's attorney objected, but the judge overruled him. Rachel pressed play. The room filled with my sister's voice. "She doesn't deserve it. She's not even his real mom." Then my father's, "Once you have custody, we'll move the funds. No one can question it." Camilla's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm. The judge leaned forward, replayed the clip, and scribbled something in his notes. After closing arguments, the judge took a long pause before speaking. "Ms. Harris, you have provided 4 years of consistent, stable care for this child. Ms. Monroe, your evidence is persuasive. I will review all materials, but I must be clear. The court prioritizes the best interest of the child above all else." We were dismissed for the day, the decision to come later in writing. Outside, the sun felt too bright after the dim weight of the courtroom. Rachel clasped my shoulder. "You did exactly what you needed to do. Whatever happens next, we've made our case airtight." I looked over at Camilla. She was standing with our parents by the courthouse steps, their faces tight with anger. She met my eyes and mouthed, "This isn't over." But I already knew that. And I also knew deep in the place where fear had lived for months that she had just lost the one thing she'd come for. The money might still be there. But Ethan? Ethan was mine. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. A thin white envelope, stamped with the county court seal, resting like a loaded trap in my mailbox. I stood in the bakery's back room with my hands trembling over the paper. Rachel had told me to wait until she was present before opening it, but I couldn't. The words were simple. Custody awarded to petitioner, Penelope Harris. It took a moment for the air to return to my lungs. Then I laughed sharp, wet, and almost disbelieving before sliding to the floor against the pantry shelf. Ethan was mine, not just in heart, but in the eyes of the law. When the formal custody meeting was scheduled, I knew Camilla would show, and I knew she'd come armed with one last play. She did. The courthouse conference room was small, with a rectangular table and cheap blinds that filtered the Georgia sunlight into dusty strips. Rachel sat beside me, her legal pad ready, while Camilla arrived with her lawyer and my parents in tow. They all looked like they'd rehearsed a scene from a play they were certain they'd win. Camilla opened with a tight smile. "Penelope, if you just sign over joint custody, we can keep this out of the news. No one needs to know the details." Rachel's eyebrow lifted. "The details are exactly why we're here." I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the sealed folder. Thick, brown, its edges worn from my nervous handling over the past month. Without a word, I slid it across the table toward the judge overseeing the formalization. "This," I said evenly, "is for the court's record." The judge broke the seal, flipping through page after page. Photos, transcripts, Calvin's reports, evidence we hadn't even needed to use at the hearing. But halfway through, he stopped. On the inside pocket was a USB drive. "What's on this?" he asked. "The full audio," Rachel answered. "Not just the snippet we played in court. It includes additional discussion between Miss Monroe, Mr. and Mrs. Harris, and a third party regarding the planned misappropriation of Ethan's trust." Camilla's face paled instantly, the pink from her cheeks draining like someone had pulled a plug. "That's private," she stammered. "It's evidence," the judge said flatly, sliding the drive into his briefcase. "And given its nature, I'm forwarding it to the state's attorney for review." My father spoke for the first time, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you've won, Penelope. But family doesn't forget betrayal." I looked him square in the eye. "Neither does a child." The meeting ended without handshakes. Camilla stormed out, my parents trailing behind her, their expressions pinched and brittle. When we stepped into the hallway, Rachel grinned for the first time since I'd hired her. "That folder was your checkmate. Even if they try again, they'll never get a judge to touch this case now." That evening, I closed the bakery early. Ethan and I celebrated with ice cream sundaes for dinner and a blanket fort in the living room. He didn't understand the legal battle, the sealed evidence, the way his future had been tugged at like a prize. He just knew I was smiling more than I had in months. As he drifted to sleep inside the fort, one hand tangled in my sweater, I whispered, "It's over, buddy. We're safe." He mumbled something half asleep, the words warm against my arm. "Mama Pen, home," and that was it. Not the court ruling, not the sealed folder, not even Camilla's face when the judge took the drive. This moment, right here, was the victory. Because I hadn't just won custody, I'd won us.